There are moments that define a life. For Sarah Carroll, at 20 years old, life was a series of these moments, each one bright with possibility. Picture her in a quiet corner of the Schoolcraft College library, textbooks fanned out, highlighter in hand, her face illuminated by the glow of a laptop. She wasn't just studying anatomy, she was mapping out a future dedicated to healing. The path to becoming a physician assistant is grueling, but Sarah possessed a rare combination of empathy and fierce determination. She juggled her demanding course load with a part-time job, the rhythm of her life a familiar one to so many students. Early morning coffee, lectures, work, and late nights fueled by the dream of what comes next. Her friends remember her laugh most of all, a sound that could cut through the stress of finals week. They recall her as the one who would share her study notes without a second thought, the one who would text you at midnight just to make sure you were okay. She was strong, but her strength was in her kindness. To her family, she was the steady, brilliant light at the center of their world. She was the daughter who never forgot to call, whose visits home filled the house with energy and stories of her new life. She was building a future, not just for herself, but for all the people she hoped to one day care for. But a shadow was growing, cast by a past she was trying to escape, and on a cold, late Saturday night, in the presumed safety of her own apartment, that shadow would violently reclaim her. The future Sarah Carroll was so meticulously building was not just stolen, it was obliterated by the person she once trusted with her heart. This is the story of a murder-suicide in Westland, Michigan, but to understand how it ended, we have to look at how it began. It's a story about the subtle, terrifying erosion of a person's safety, about warning signs that were not just unheeded but were part of a pattern recognized by experts as a countdown to tragedy. The crime scene was the Woodland Villa Apartments, a place of quiet suburban normalcy, but on that night it became the final, brutal chapter in a story of obsessive control. Sarah's ex-boyfriend Lincoln arrived at her door. Their nearly year-long relationship had ended months prior. For Sarah, it was a necessary end to a partnership that had become troubled and suffocating. For Lincoln, the breakup was not an end, but an unacceptable loss of control. Rejection for him was not a reason to move on, it was a trigger for obsession. His campaign of terror began almost immediately. For 2 months, Sarah's life was no longer her own. Her phone, once a source of connection, became a tool of her torment, buzzing incessantly with his texts and calls, pleading one moment, demanding the next. He began appearing wherever she was, a silent figure across the street from her part-time job, a car idling in the college parking lot long after her classes had ended. Her world began to shrink. The routes she walked, the places she felt comfortable, were now tinged with fear. Every notification, every unexpected footstep sparked a jolt of anxiety. Recognizing the clear and present danger, Sarah did exactly what she was supposed to do. She fought back, not with anger, but with process. She began the arduous task of seeking a personal protection order, PPO, a legal document she hoped would build a wall between her and him. It was a race against time, filling out paperwork, documenting the harassment, waiting for a court date, all while the man she feared remained free. She was navigating a system that, while designed to protect, often moves at a bureaucratic pace, a pace that doesn't always match the terrifying speed of an escalating obsession. Her mother, Jennifer Carroll, later recounted the timeline of terror to Fox 2 Detroit, her words a stark summary of a parent's worst nightmare. She was with Lincoln, her ex-boyfriend, for almost a year, and they were having trouble. He was stalking her for the past 2 months, and he came here last night, shot her, called 911, said he killed his girlfriend, and then shot himself. Inside apartment number 214, the final moments were ones of unimaginable horror. Investigators believe Lincoln forced his way inside. He was armed with a shotgun. In the place where Sarah studied, slept, and dreamed, he unleashed a barrage of violence. Firing multiple rounds, her life was over in an instant. Then came the final chilling act. With the violence complete, Lincoln picked up his phone. He dialed 911. Investigators who heard the call describe his voice as unnervingly calm, devoid of panic or remorse. He was not calling for help. He was making a statement. He confessed to the dispatcher that he had just killed his girlfriend. Before officers could storm the building, he used the same shotgun to end his own life. The eerie silence that greeted the police upon entry stood in stark contrast to the violence of the preceding moments and the cold confession that had brought them there. For Jennifer and James Carroll, the world as they knew it ended with that late-night phone call, the kind every parent dreads. The pain they describe is not just emotional, it's a physical weight, a constant ache. Jennifer, in her grief, immediately felt a need to warn others, her message a desperate plea to bridge the communication gap that can exist between parents and their young adult children. To other parents, watch your kids, try to get more into their life, try to get them to be open and talk to you. Her father, James, saw the tragedy through the additional lens of a profound mental health crisis. His words were not an excuse for Lincoln's actions, but an explanation and a call to action to prevent the next tragedy. If their children are suffering from mental illness, get them some help. Get them the help that they need before something like this happens. His plea speaks to a difficult truth in cases of intimate partner homicide. The act is often a collision of possessiveness, an inability to cope with rejection, and frequently, untreated mental health issues that can fester into dangerous violent ideations. The murder of Sarah Carroll was a private horror that became a public tragedy. In the days that followed, the Westland community wrapped its arms around the Carroll family. At a vigil, hundreds of people stood shoulder to shoulder against the cold, their faces illuminated by candlelight. Friends, professors, and neighbors shared memories. They spoke of Sarah's brilliant mind, her quiet confidence, and the unwavering loyalty she showed her friends. A professor recalled her insightful questions in class, the mark of a student not just completing assignments but truly engaging with the mission of her chosen field. The community was grieving not just a person but a future that had been stolen from all of them. But as the personal grief was being processed, a larger, more systemic conversation began. Sarah's story is a tragic, textbook example of the failures that can lead to intimate partner homicide. The statistics are a grim echo of her reality. Researchers at the National Domestic Violence Hotline confirm that stalking is one of the most significant predictors of lethality. In 3 out of 4 domestic homicides, the perpetrator had a history of stalking, had a firearm, and the risk skyrockets. Advocates point to critical gaps in the system. When Sarah filed for a PPO, she entered a vulnerable waiting period, a legal gray area where the threat is documented but the protection is not yet enforceable. Furthermore, even with a protective order, laws vary by state on whether an abuser is required to surrender their firearms. This is often called the lethal loophole. For Sarah, the system she turned to for salvation simply did not move fast enough. Her story became a devastating case study in the race between a victim seeking help and a perpetrator intent on violence. Ultimately, though, this is not a story about statistics. It is the story of one young woman, a life of immense promise cut short. Her father, James, put it in the simplest, most human terms. She was loved by everybody she met. She was wonderful. I'm going to miss my baby. The Westland Police Department's investigation is now closed, but for the Carroll family, there is no closure. There is only a life sentence of what ifs. What if the system had been faster? What if those around her ex-boyfriend had recognized the signs? What if she had been able to see the future she was working so hard for? Her story, born in a private relationship, ends as a public warning. Stalking is not romantic, it is a rehearsal for violence. Harassment is not a sign of passion, it is a methodical breaking down of a person's spirit and safety. And our collective silence in the face of these red flags can be a death sentence. We must listen to our friends, believe them when they say they are afraid, and demand a system that treats these cries for help with the life or death urgency they deserve. If you or someone you know is experiencing stalking or intimate partner violence, you are not alone. Help is available. In the US, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE-7233 or visit their website at thehotline.org. You can also dial or text 988 for immediate confidential support. Tonight, we remember Sarah Carroll. We remember her not as a statistic, but for the life she lived, the joy she brought, and the healing career she had just begun. We remember the light she cast, a light that was tragically, senselessly put out.